New York City shines under a blanket of lights, a place where dreams rise as high as the skyscrapers piercing the Manhattan skyline. It's a city of ambition, where people chase success through the hustle of crowded streets and the glow of Times Square. But beneath the glamour, stories of love and betrayal unfold in the shadows of those towering buildings. This is one such story, a tale of a woman trapped by loyalty, a man consumed by greed, and another whose heart awakens at the sight of her pain. Welcome to a journey that begins in darkness, but promises a glimmer of hope. Clara Evans walks through this world with a quiet grace. She's a woman of soft words and sharp mind, her brown eyes holding a kindness that life hasn't yet erased. At 30, she works as an accountant, her days filled with numbers and her nights shadowed by a marriage that weighs her down. Clara's life wasn't always like this. Once, she dreamed of owning a flower shop, arranging petals into moments of joy. But those dreams faded when she tied her fate to James Carter, her husband of 3 years. She stays with him not out of love, but for a promise she made to someone else, her father, Henry Evans. Henry is a frail man, his heart weakened by years of illness. A retired schoolteacher, he now relies on a machine to keep his pulse steady, its cost covered by James's paycheck. Clara would do anything to keep him alive, even if it means enduring a man who sees her as a tool rather than a partner. James Carter is a different creature altogether. At 32, he's a rising star in the cutthroat world of New York advertising, his charm masking a hunger for power. He works late nights at a sleek Madison Avenue firm, crafting campaigns that sell dreams he doesn't believe in. To James, success is everything, and he's willing to sacrifice anyone to climb the ladder, even his own wife. Across the city, in a glass-walled office atop a midtown tower, sits Ethan Brooks. At 35, he's the CEO of Brooks Innovations, a tech empire that shapes the future with every line of code. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, Ethan commands respect without raising his voice. He's a man who built his fortune from nothing, orphaned young and driven by a need to prove himself. Yet, despite his wealth, Ethan keeps his heart guarded. Colleagues call him cold, a machine in a tailored suit, but they don't see the loneliness he hides. He's never known love, never felt its pull, until one night changes everything. That night comes at the Waldorf Astoria, a grand hotel where chandeliers gleam and champagne flows. James attends a company gala, a chance to secure a multi-million-dollar contract with Brooks Innovations. The pressure from his boss is relentless, a deadline looming like a storm cloud over his career. He needs Ethan's signature, and he's desperate enough to play a dangerous game. Clara is his pawn, a piece he'll move without hesitation. He has a plan, one that will strip her dignity and push her into Ethan's room, a twisted offering to win favor. But James doesn't know what's coming. He doesn't see that Ethan, the man he hopes to impress, will look at Clara and find something he never expected. Clara stands at the edge of this moment, unaware of the storm about to break. She wears a dress James chose, its fabric clinging to her like a second skin, a symbol of the control he wields. Her heart beats fast, not from excitement, but from dread. She knows James is up to something, his whispers sharp with intent. Across the room, Ethan watches the crowd, his mind on business, until his eyes catch a figure he can't ignore. Their worlds are about to collide, a clash of betrayal and beauty that will rewrite their fates. What happens when a man's cruelty opens the door to another's love? Can a single glance spark a flame strong enough to burn away years of pain? This is where our story begins, in a city that never sleeps, with a woman who deserves more than she's been given, and a man who might just give it to her. The Waldorf Astoria glows with golden light, its ballroom alive with the hum of voices and the clink of glasses. It's a gala for James's advertising firm, a night of polished suits and forced smiles, where deals are made over champagne and handshakes. James Carter stands near the bar, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against a glass of whiskey. His boss dropped a bomb earlier that day, a deadline that could make or break his career. Brooks Innovations wants a new campaign, a multi-million-dollar contract, and Ethan Brooks holds the key. James needs to impress him, and he's running out of time. His eyes flick to Clara across the room, her presence his last card to play. Clara adjusts the straps of the dress James handed her before they left home. It's a deep red number, too tight, too revealing, nothing like the modest sweaters she prefers. She feels exposed, every step drawing stares she doesn't want. James caught her at the apartment, his voice low and cold. He said, "Wear this tonight and get Ethan to sign the deal, or I'll cut your dad's hospital funds." "You want him to die?" Her stomach twisted, but she couldn't argue. Henry's face flashed in her mind, his frail hands clutching hers during his last visit to the ICU. The machine keeping him alive costs thousands, and James pays it all. She nodded, silent, and slipped into the dress, trading her pride for her father's breath. Now she lingers near a table of hors d'oeuvres, her hands trembling as she picks up a glass of water. James weaves through the crowd, his smile practiced, his eyes calculating. He reaches her, leaning close, his breath sharp with liquor. "It's time," he says. "Ethan's upstairs in his suite. You're going to convince him to sign. Don't mess this up, Clara, or Henry's done." Her throat tightens, but she nods again, the weight of his words pressing her down. She follows him to the elevator, her heels clicking on marble, her heart pounding louder with every floor they climb. The doors open on the top level, a quiet hallway lined with plush carpet and dim lights. James stops at a door marked 1801, Ethan's private suite for the night. He turns to Clara, his hands rough as he grabs her coat, a thin layer of warmth she'd clung to. "You don't need this," he says, yanking it off her shoulders. The dress beneath shimmers, its neckline plunging, her skin bare from collarbone to waist. She gasps, arms crossing instinctively, but James grips her wrist. "Stand up straight. Knock on that door and get inside. Tell him you're my gift, my apology for a late pitch. He'll understand." His voice is a blade, cutting through her resistance. She stares at him, tears welling, but he steps back, pointing. "Do it, Clara. Now." She lifts a shaky hand, her knuckles brushing the wood. One knock, then two, each sound a surrender. James watches, satisfied, then turns and strides away, his footsteps fading into the hum of the elevator. The door swings open, and Clara stumbles forward, her balance lost in a flood of shame. Ethan Brooks stands there, a stack of papers in one hand, his tie loosened after hours of meetings. He's taller than she imagined, his blue eyes narrowing as he takes her in. She catches herself against the frame, the dress slipping slightly, revealing a shoulder she can't cover. Her breath hitches, her voice a whisper. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to come." Ethan drops the papers, instinct kicking in as he steadies her. His hands are firm but gentle, guiding her inside before she falls. The door clicks shut, and he steps back, studying her. The dress clings to her like a wound, her arms wrapped tight around herself. "What's going on?" he asks, his tone sharp but not unkind. Clara's eyes meet his, glassy with unshed tears. "My husband, James Carter, he said it's for a deal. He'll stop paying for my dad's hospital if I don't." She trails off, her head bowing, the weight of it too much. Ethan's jaw tightens, a flicker of anger crossing his face, but it's not aimed at her. He moves to a chair, pulling his suit jacket from the back and draping it over her shoulders. The fabric is warm, heavy, a shield against the cold air and her humiliation. "Sit down," he says, pointing to a plush sofa near a window overlooking the city. She sinks into it, clutching the jacket, her fingers tracing its lapels. Ethan sits across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Who's your dad?" he asks. Clara swallows, her voice barely audible. "Henry Evans. He's got a bad heart. James pays for the machine keeping him alive. If I don't do this, he'll cut it off." She looks up, expecting judgment, but finds something else in Ethan's gaze, something soft and unguarded. He runs a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Your husband's a piece of work," he says, almost to himself. Then, softer. You don't have to do this. Not for him, not for anyone. Clara shakes her head, a tear slipping free. You don't understand. I can't lose my dad. He's all I have left. Ethan watches her, the way she fights to hold herself together, the strength beneath her fragility. His chest tightens, a pull he hasn't felt in years. She's beautiful, yes, but it's more than that. It's her heart laid bare in this moment that hooks him. He's seen deals brokered with money and power, but never with someone's soul. Listen to me, he says, his voice low, steady. You're not a bargaining chip. I don't want you here because he sent you. I want you to stay because I'm asking you to. Let me help you figure this out. Clara blinks, startled, her lips parting in disbelief. Why would you do that? She asks. Ethan leans closer, his eyes locked on hers. Because I've never met anyone like you, and I'm not letting you walk back to that bastard tonight. She stares at him, her breath catching, and for the first time in years, she feels seen, not as a tool, not as a burden, but as Clara. And Ethan in that instant knows he's lost, his heart claimed by a woman he's just met, a woman he'll fight to save. Clara sits on the sofa in Ethan's suite, the city lights painting streaks of gold across her face. His jacket still rests on her shoulders, a borrowed armor against the chill of the night and the weight of her confession. She's just told him about James, about her father, about the deal that brought her here. Ethan listens, his expression unreadable, but inside a storm brews. He's met men like James before, climbers who trade anything for a step up. But this feels different. This cuts deeper. Clara's voice trembles as she speaks, and he knows there's more to her story, a shadow lurking behind her words. He needs to understand it, not just for her, but for the pull he feels, the one that started the moment she stumbled through his door. 3 years ago, Clara's life was simpler, brighter. She was 27, fresh from college, with a degree in accounting and a head full of dreams. She met James at a coffee shop near Union Square, his easy smile and quick wit drawing her in. He was ambitious, a junior ad executive with big plans, and she admired his drive. They married 6 months later, a small ceremony in Brooklyn, with Henry beaming from the front row. Clara wore a white dress she'd sewn herself, daisies tucked into her hair, and believed in forever. That night, their wedding night, should have been the start of something beautiful. Instead, it marked the end of who she used to be. James had a meeting that evening, a last-minute pitch for a car dealership account. He told Clara it was routine, nothing to worry about, but his eyes were restless, his hands fidgeting. "Come with me," he said, pulling her along to a hotel bar downtown. She didn't question it, trusting him, her new husband. There he introduced her to a man in a gray suit, a client with a cigar and a leer that made her skin crawl. James handed her a glass of wine, his voice smooth. "Drink this, honey. Relax. We need this guy on board." She sipped it, the taste bitter, and soon her head spun, her limbs heavy. She remembers James whispering, "Go talk to him. Make him happy, or your dad's medical bills are on us alone." Henry had just been diagnosed, his heart failing, and James knew she'd do anything to save him. Clara tried to stand, her vision blurring, but the man guided her to a booth. She doesn't recall much after that, just fragments, his hand on her arm, James watching from across the room. Nothing happened, not the way James later claimed, but he snapped photos anyway, her dress slipping off one shoulder as she slumped against the seat. She woke the next morning in their apartment, James beside her, his face cold. "You messed up last night," he said, showing her the pictures. "You flirted with him. You're lucky I got the deal. Don't ever embarrass me again." She protested, confused, but he held the photos over her like a guillotine. "One word, and these go to your dad." Imagine what it'd do to his heart. From then on, he used them to keep her in line, a leash she couldn't break. Now, Clara lives in a cage of his making. She works at a small accounting firm near Wall Street, her salary barely covering groceries while James controls the rest. Every month, he pays Henry's hospital bills, a reminder of her debt to him. He doesn't touch her, doesn't speak to her beyond commands, his resentment a wall between them. She's his prisoner, her dreams of flowers and freedom buried under his threats. She stopped fighting years ago, her spirit worn thin, until tonight, until Ethan's voice pulled her back. Sitting here, she feels the past clawing at her, a wound she's never let heal. She doesn't tell him all of it, not yet, but her eyes betray the depth of her pain. Ethan watches her, his mind racing. He's no stranger to betrayal, growing up with a father who sold their family home for a bottle of gin, leaving him and his mother on the street. But Clara's story hits harder, a quiet courage woven into her surrender. He stands, pacing to the window, the city sprawling below like a map of his own climb. He's built Brooks Innovations from scratch, a fortress of code and steel. But it's never filled the emptiness inside. Tonight, though, something shifts. He turns back to her, his decision made. "I'm going to find out what he's hiding," he says. "No one should live like this." He picks up his phone, dialing a number he rarely uses. "Mark, it's Ethan. I need a favor. Dig into a guy named James Carter, works at that ad firm on Madison. I want everything, especially anything from 3 years back." Mark's a private investigator, an old friend from leaner days, discreet and thorough. Ethan hangs up, meeting Clara's gaze. "You don't have to go back to him tonight," he says. "Stay here, I've got a guest room. We'll figure this out." She hesitates, fear warring with a flicker of trust. "Why are you doing this?" she asks again. He steps closer, his voice soft. "Because I see you, Clara, and I can't look away." She nods, exhaustion winning, and he shows her to a spare room down the hall. The bed is crisp, white, a world away from the chaos she knows. She sinks into it, Ethan's jacket still around her, his scent lingering like a promise. He returns to the living room, pouring a coffee, his mind on overdrive. Mark calls back an hour later, his voice low. "Found something. Carter's got a history. 3 years ago he closed a deal with a car company right after his wedding. A coworker saw him set up his wife that night, staged some photos. Nothing happened, but he's been using them ever since. Guy's a snake." Ethan's grip tightens on the mug, anger simmering. "Thanks, Mark. Keep digging." He sits staring at the skyline, Clara's face burned into his thoughts. She's asleep now, safe for the first time in years, and he feels it, a tether forming between them. He doesn't know her well, not yet, but he knows this. She's worth fighting for. Tomorrow he'll start unraveling James's lies, but tonight he lets himself imagine a different ending, one where she's free, where she's his. He types a message on his phone, an anonymous line to hers, a number Mark pulled. "You're stronger than you know. You deserve love." He hits send, a quiet vow, and leans back, the city humming below, a witness to the beginning of something new. Clara wakes to sunlight filtering through the curtains of Ethan's guest room, the city's distant hum a soft backdrop. She's still wrapped in his jacket, the fabric carrying a trace of cedar and coffee, a comfort she hasn't known in years. For a moment, she forgets the weight of last night, the gala, James's cruel hands stripping her coat away. Then it floods back, and her chest tightens. She checks her phone, a single message from an unknown number glowing on the screen. "You're stronger than you know. You deserve love." Her breath catches, a flicker of warmth cutting through the dread. She doesn't know it's Ethan, not yet, but the words settle into her like a seed taking root. Ethan knocks lightly on the door, a tray in his hands, coffee and croissants balanced carefully. "Morning," he says, his voice steady but kind. "Thought you might need this." She sits up, smoothing her hair, the dress from last night a crumpled reminder of her shame. "You didn't have to," she says, but takes the coffee, her fingers brushing his. He sits on a chair across from her, watching as she sips, her eyes darting to the window. "You're safe here," he adds. "I meant what I said last night. We'll figure this out." Clara nods, unsure, but there's something in his gaze, a quiet strength that makes her want to believe him. She can't stay forever, though. James expects her home, and Henry's next hospital payment looms. "I have to go back," she says, standing, handing him the jacket. Ethan frowns, but doesn't push. "Let me drive you," he offers. "And if you need anything, call me." He scribbles his number on a card, pressing it into her hand. She leaves, the ride silent. His presence is shield she doesn't want to lose. At her apartment, James is gone, off to work, and she breathes easier. But his threat echoes, a chain she can't break. She texts Ethan later, a simple, "Thank you," and he replies, "Anytime." It's small, but it's a start. Days pass, and Ethan finds a way to see her again. He calls her office, posing as a client needing tax advice, a pretext thin but effective. Clara agrees, meeting him at Brooks Innovations after hours. The building is quiet, its glass walls reflecting the city's glow. He greets her in a corner office, papers spread out, but it's a ruse. "I didn't really need help with numbers," he admits, a half smile tugging at his lips. "I just wanted to see you." She blushes, caught off guard, and he pulls a gray sweater from a bag. "For you," he says. "I noticed you didn't like that dress. Thought this might feel better." She takes it, the wool soft against her skin, and slips it on, a shield against the memory of James's choice. They talk, first about nothing, then everything. Ethan asks about her life, her dreams, and she tells him about the flower shop she once sketched in a notebook, now lost somewhere in her closet. "Why'd you stop?" he asks. She shrugs, her voice low. "James said it was a waste of time, said I'd never make it." Ethan leans forward, his eyes intense. "He's wrong. You could start small, a cart maybe. I'd buy every flower you sell." She laughs, a sound she hasn't heard from herself in too long, and it lights something in him. He's falling, deeper than he planned, her resilience pulling him in. Their meetings become a secret rhythm. Clara tells James she's working late, a lie he buys because it suits his ego. She meets Ethan at Central Park, the air crisp with autumn, leaves crunching under their feet. They sit on a bench near the Bethesda fountain, the water glinting under moonlight. He points to the stars, naming ones he learned as a kid, Orion and Cassiopeia, his voice a steady hum. "I used to look up there when I had nothing. He's kept me going." She watches him, his profile sharp against the night, and asks, "What about now?" He turns, meeting her gaze. "Now, I've got something worth holding on to. You." She tells him more, about Henry's quiet pride in her, about the daisies she wore at her wedding, now a bitter memory. Ethan listens, his hand brushing hers, a touch she doesn't pull away from. "I never thought I'd feel this," he says one night, the park empty around them. "I built walls, kept everyone out, then you walked in and they just fell." Clara's heart races, fear and hope tangling together. "I'm married," she whispers, a reminder to herself as much as him. He nods, serious. "I know. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm just asking you to let me be here." She doesn't answer, but her hand stays in his, a silent yes. Their time grows bolder, stolen moments stretching into hours. Ethan brings her to a rooftop garden his company owns, a hidden patch of green above the city. She runs her fingers over roses and lavender, her eyes bright. "This is what I wanted," she says. "Something alive, something mine." He steps closer, his voice low. "It can be yours. Start with one flower. I'll be your first customer, like I said." She smiles, real this time, and he feels it, a shift. She's healing, piece by piece, and he's part of it. He wants to kiss her, but he waits. Knowing she's not ready. Knowing she's still tethered to James. James notices, though. He's not blind, not entirely. Clara's late nights pile up, her excuses thin, and his suspicion festers. He follows her one evening, trailing her cab to the park, but loses her in the crowd. He doesn't see Ethan, not yet, but he feels her slipping, a control he's losing. At home, he snaps, "Where were you?" She holds steady, her voice calm. "Work." "You wanted me to keep up, didn't you?" He glares, unconvinced, but lets it drop. She's changing, a strength he didn't expect, and it unnerves him. He doubles down, checking her phone, but finds nothing. She's careful, her texts to Ethan sparse, her trust in him growing. Clara feels it too, the shift inside her. Ethan's words, his faith, stir something dormant. She digs out her old notebook one night, sketches of tulips and lilies filling the pages. She shows it to him at their next meeting, her hands shaking. "I found this," she says. "Maybe I could try again." He takes it, flipping through, his smile wide. "This is beautiful, Clara. You're beautiful." He sets it down, stepping closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "You don't need his permission. You never did." She leans into him, her breath warm against his palm, and for a moment, they're all that exists, the city fading below. Their bond deepens, a quiet defiance against James's hold. She starts planning small steps, a future she can touch. Ethan helps, researching carts, vendors, his belief in her unwavering. She's not free yet, not fully, but she's closer, her spirit waking with every night they share. James looms, a threat she can't ignore, but Ethan's there, a light she clings to. She doesn't know what's coming, the storm James will unleash, but for now she has this, a love blooming in secret, a hope she's learning to claim. The Brooks Innovations Gala fills a sleek ballroom in Midtown, its glass walls reflecting the city's pulse. Guests in tuxedos and gowns mingle under soft lights, their laughter mixing with the hum of ambition. Clara stands near the edge of the room, her gray sweater swapped for a simple black dress Ethan picked, elegant but hers, not James's choice. She's here at Ethan's invitation, a quiet presence beside him as he works the crowd. Their secret meetings have stretched weeks now, her heart tethered to his, but tonight feels different. James is here too, his eyes tracking her from across the floor, a predator sensing prey slipping free. Ethan stays close, his hand brushing hers when no one's looking, a reassurance she clings to. He's spent days planning this night, not just for business, but for her. Mark, his investigator, delivered more last week, a recording from an old co-worker of James's, a man named Tom who saw the wedding night set up 3 years ago. Carter bragged about it, Tom said on tape, staged those photos to keep her quiet. Nothing happened, but he's held it over her ever since. Ethan's kept it close, a weapon he hopes to never use, but James's shadow grows darker, and he knows time's running out. James watches them, his whiskey glass sweating in his grip. He's noticed Clara's absences, her late nights, her new steadiness. He followed her once, lost her in Central Park, but tonight confirms it. She's with Ethan, too comfortable, too alive. His deal with Brooks Innovations hangs by a thread, his boss breathing down his neck, and Clara's defiance stings worse than failure. He downs the drink, weaving through the crowd, his mind a tangle of rage and desperation. He needs her back in line, needs Ethan's signature, and he'll break her to get both. He waits until Ethan steps away, called to a quick meeting with investors, leaving Clara alone near a quiet alcove. He moves fast, grabbing her arm, pulling her into the shadowed corner. "What the hell are you doing?" he hisses, his breath sharp with alcohol. Clara flinches, but doesn't pull away, her eyes steady. "Let go, James," she says, her voice low. He tightens his grip, leaning close. "You think you can play me? I see you with him. Leave Brooks, or I'll send those photos to every hospital in New York. Your dad's dead without me." Her stomach drops, Henry's frail face flashing before her, but she holds firm. "You've lied enough," she says. "I'm done being your puppet." His face twists, a snarl forming, but before he can speak, Ethan's voice cuts through. "Get your hands off her." Ethan strides over, his frame tense, his eyes locked on James. The crowd shifts, heads turning, but he doesn't care. James releases Clara, stepping back, his smile forced. "Just a husband talking to his wife, Brooks. No need to play hero." Ethan ignores him, turning to Clara. "You okay?" She nods, rubbing her arm, and he faces James again, his voice cold. "You don't talk to her. You don't touch her. Not anymore. James laughs, sharp and hollow. She's mine, not yours. Ask her about our wedding night. She's got secrets you don't want. Clara stiffens, the memory of those photos a knife in her gut. But Ethan doesn't flinch. He steps closer, his height towering over James. I know about that night, he says. I know you set her up, took pictures to trap her. You're the one with secrets, Carter, and they're about to come out. James pales, his bravado cracking, but he doubles down. Prove it, big shot. You've got nothing. Ethan pulls his phone from his pocket, tapping the screen, and Tom's voice spills out, clear and damning. Carter bragged about it, staged those photos to keep her quiet. Nothing happened, but he's held it over her ever since. The room quiets, guests pausing mid-sentence, the recording echoing off the walls. James freezes, his eyes darting, searching for an escape. That's a lie, he stammers, but his voice shakes and no one buys it. Clara steps forward, her hands trembling but her spine straight. It's true, she says, loud enough for all to hear. 3 years ago, he forced me to that bar, took those pictures, made me think I'd betrayed him. He's used them to control me, to keep me paying for my dad. I'm done. Her words hang heavy, a confession and a release, and Ethan's chest swells with pride. James lunges, grabbing her wrist again, his face red. You ungrateful little... He doesn't finish. Ethan moves, fast, shoving him back, pinning him against the wall with a forearm to his chest. Touch her again and you're finished, he growls. Security steps in, 2 men in black suits, but Ethan waves them off, releasing James with a shove. He's not worth it. James stumbles, glaring, but the fight's gone out of him. The crowd murmurs, phones out, whispers spreading like wildfire. Ethan turns to Clara, his hand finding hers, grounding her. You're free now, he says. He can't hurt you. She shakes her head, tears brimming. He still has those photos. He'll use them. Ethan squeezes her hand, his voice firm. Not anymore. He nods to a corner where 2 police officers approach, badges glinting under the lights. I called them yesterday, he says. Gave them the recording, the witness statement. He's done. The officers reach James, one reading his rights, the other cuffing his wrists. James Carter, you're under arrest for coercion and extortion, the officer says, his tone flat. James twists, shouting, You can't do this. I'll ruin you both. But they lead him away, his threats swallowed by the closing doors. Clara watches, her knees weak, the weight of years lifting with every step he takes out of her life. Ethan pulls her close, his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. It's over, he says, and she believes him. The crowd parts, some staring, some clapping, but she doesn't care. She turns to Ethan, her voice breaking. I've lived in his shadow too long. I want out. I want a divorce. He nods, his eyes soft. You've got it. Whatever you need, I'm here. She leans into him, her head against his chest, his heartbeat a rhythm she can trust. The gala resumes, chatter rising, but Clara feels detached, a new lightness in her bones. Ethan guides her to a balcony, the night air cool against her skin. You were incredible in there, he says, leaning on the railing, the city sprawling below. I didn't do much, she replies, but he shakes his head. You stood up to him. That's everything. She looks at him, his face lit by the glow of skyscrapers, and sees more than a savior. She sees a man who's given her back herself. Thank you, she says, simple but deep, and he smiles, a rare warmth breaking through his usual reserve. They stand there, the world shrinking to just them, the past unraveling behind her. James is gone, his threats empty, his power broken. Clara breathes, free for the first time in years, and Ethan stays beside her, his presence a promise. She doesn't know what tomorrow holds, but she knows this: she's not alone anymore. The city hums, a witness to her liberation, and in Ethan's eyes, she finds a future she might dare to claim. A year has passed since the gala, and Brooklyn hums with its usual rhythm, a quieter pulse than Manhattan's roar. Clara stands behind the counter of her flower shop, a small storefront on a cobblestone street, its windows bursting with color. Petals and promises, she named it, a nod to the dreams she reclaimed and the vows she now makes to herself. Tulips line the shelves, roses spill from buckets, and daisies nod in vases. Their simplicity an echo of her wedding day, now rewritten in her own terms. The air smells of earth and bloom, a scent that heals her with every breath. She's 31 now, her brown eyes brighter, her hands steady as she ties a ribbon around a bouquet. Henry sits in a chair near the door, his oxygen tank humming softly, his smile wide as he watches her work. He's better these days, his heart stabilized with new treatments Ethan funded after James's arrest. "You've done it, kiddo," he says, his voice raspy but warm. "I always knew you could." Clara laughs, handing him a daisy. "You're biased, Dad." He tucks it behind his ear, grinning, and she feels a lightness she'd forgotten. James is a memory, locked away in a prison upstate, sentenced to 5 years for coercion and extortion. The photos, his last weapon, were destroyed, evidence in a case that set her free. She thinks of that night often, the gala where Ethan turned her world right side up. He didn't just save her from James, he gave her back her voice, her choice. After the arrest, he hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, who filed Clara's divorce papers in a week. James signed, no fight left. His empire of lies crumbled. Clara moved out, taking Henry to a small apartment near Prospect Park, and started over. Ethan was there through it all, quiet but constant, his support a lifeline she didn't expect. He never pushed, never demanded, just stayed, a steady hand when hers shook. The shop came later, a dream she dared to chase. Ethan found the space, a lease he'd negotiated down to something she could afford. "Start small," he'd said, echoing their nights in Central Park. And she did. A cart first, then this, her hands shaping a future petal by petal. Customers come daily, locals mostly, drawn by her warmth and the stories she tells with every arrangement. She's good at it, better than she imagined, and every sale feels like a victory. Ethan's her best client, stopping by with excuses, a rose for his desk, a lily for no reason at all. She knows he doesn't need them, but she loves that he comes. Today's different, though. The bell above the door jingles and Ethan steps in, his suit crisp, his dark hair catching the afternoon light. He holds a small bundle, white carnations tied with twine, her favorite flower from a night they'd spent on his rooftop garden. "For you," he says, setting them on the counter. She smiles, taking them, her fingers brushing his. "You're spoiling me," she teases, but her eyes soften, seeing something new in him. He's nervous, a rare crack in his calm, and it makes her pause. "What's wrong?" she asks, setting the flowers down. He takes a breath, stepping closer, his voice low so Henry won't hear. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. And that's why I'm here." He pulls a box from his pocket, small, velvet, and her heart skips. "Clara, I've spent a year watching you build this, watching you become you. I loved you that first night, when you walked into my room, broken but unbroken. I've loved you every day since, through every flower, every smile." He opens the box, a ring glinting inside, simple, a single diamond set in gold. "I don't promise you the world because you've already made your own. I promise my world, to love you, to stand by you. Will you marry me?" She stares, her throat tight, tears welling. Henry coughs, a grin spreading, but stays quiet, letting her moment unfold. Clara thinks of the past, James's chains, the years she lost. Then she looks at Ethan, his blue eyes steady, his hand outstretched, and sees the future. Not a cage, but a home. "Yes," she says, her voice breaking into a laugh. "Yes, I will." He slips the ring on her finger, his hands trembling, and pulls her into his arms. She fits there, warm and safe, her head against his chest. His heart beat a song she knows by heart. Henry claps, slow and deliberate, his eyes misty. "About time, Brooks," he calls, and they laugh, the sound filling the shop. Ethan kisses her forehead, soft, a promise sealed, and she feels it, a joy she'd stopped believing in. The sun dips low, casting a golden glow through the windows, bathing the flowers in light. They step outside, hand in hand, the city stretching before them. Clara looks at her shop, her father waving from the door, and Ethan beside her, his grip firm. She's freed not just from James, but for this, a life she chose. They walk down the street, the sky bruising purple, Brooklyn's quiet charm wrapping around them. She thinks of their first night, his jacket on her shoulders, his words cutting through her dark. He'd seen her then, truly seen her, and he sees her now, the woman she's become. "Where to?" he asks, his voice light. "Anywhere," she says, smiling, "as long as it's with you." He pulls her close, and they keep going, footsteps in sync, a new chapter unfolding under the city's watchful eye. Clara's journey ends here, not with a shadow but with light. She's built something beautiful, a shop, a love, a family. Ethan's beside her, his promise kept, his heart hers. The past fades, a distant echo, and the future blooms, vivid and real. New York hums on, its towers rising, its streets alive, but for them, it's this moment, this quiet happiness that matters most.
The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Manhattan Hotel ballroom sparkled like a galaxy of stars above the heads of New York's elite. Among them stood Blake Harrington III, a man whose net worth rivaled the GDP of small countries. At 42, his salt and pepper hair only enhanced his sharp features, giving him the appearance of a predator disguised in a custom Tom Ford suit. The charity gala was in full swing, champagne flowing as freely as the insincere compliments exchanged between socialites. Blake surveyed the room with cold blue eyes that had witnessed 1,000 business deals and just as many broken spirits. He wasn't just attending this event, he owned it, like he owned everything else in his life. "Mr. Harrington, the auction pieces are ready for your inspection," whispered his assistant Diane, her voice barely audible above the orchestra. Blake nodded dismissively. In a moment. His attention had been captured by something far more interesting than overpriced art, meant to assuage the guilt of the wealthy. At the bar stood a woman he had never seen before, a rarity in his insular world of high society. She wore a simple navy blue dress that hadn't come from any designer's latest collection. Her chestnut hair fell in natural waves rather than the meticulous styling of the other women present. "Who is that?" Blake demanded, pointing his champagne flute in her direction. Diane followed his gaze. "I believe that's Emma Foster, sir. She's one of the new event coordinators for the charity. First big event." Blake's lips curled into what might have been mistaken for a smile on anyone else. On him, it looked like a shark spotting prey. "Interesting." He made his way through the crowd, which parted for him like the Red Sea. People who had been mid-conversation suddenly found urgent matters elsewhere as he approached. Blake was accustomed to this effect. Fear was the currency he preferred to trade in. "You're new," he said, not bothering with an introduction as he reached Emma. He didn't need one. Everyone knew who Blake Harrington was. Emma turned, her amber eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. "Mr. Harrington, yes, I'm Emma Foster. I'm coordinating the silent auction tonight." "And how did someone like you end up at an event like this?" The question carried a sting, the implication clear in his tone. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me? Someone so ordinary," Blake clarified, taking a sip of his champagne while maintaining eye contact. "This room is filled with extraordinary people. You stick out." Instead of shrinking, Emma straightened her posture. "Perhaps that's not such a bad thing. Extraordinary doesn't always mean better." Blake laughed, a sound that held no warmth. "In my experience, it absolutely does. But then again, my experience is rather more extensive than yours, I imagine." "Is that so?" Emma's voice remained calm, though her knuckles whitened around her glass. "Well, Mr. Harrington, I'd argue that extraordinary people who use their position to belittle others might not be as remarkable as they believe themselves to be." The silence that followed her statement seemed to ripple outward. Nearby conversations halted as people turned to witness what was unfolding. No one spoke to Blake Harrington this way. No one. Do you have any idea who I am? Blake's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. A billionaire with evidently poor manners, Emma replied without hesitation. Your bank account may be impressive, Mr. Harrington, but your personality leaves much to be desired. The crowd collectively held its breath. I could have you fired with a single phone call, Blake threatened, his facade of civility crumbling. Emma set down her glass with deliberate care. Then I suppose I should thank you for showing your true colors so quickly. It saves us both time. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the bar toward him. When you're ready to apologize, my contact information is there. Until then, I have an auction to oversee. With that, she walked away, leaving Blake Harrington, the man who bought and sold companies over breakfast, standing alone at the bar, clutching a business card, and experiencing something he hadn't felt in decades: rejection. From across the room, Diane watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as her boss's face turned a shade of red she had never seen before. The night was young, and already it had taken a turn no one could have predicted. Emma pushed through the service, entrance into the kitchen, her confident stride faltering only when she was out of sight. She leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. What have I done? She whispered to herself, thinking of the bills piling up at home and the rent due in a week. What have I done? But despite the potential consequences, she couldn't bring herself to regret standing up to Blake Harrington. Some things were worth more than money, like dignity, and that was something the billionaire with all his wealth seemed to lack entirely. 3 weeks later, Emma Foster sat at her kitchen table surrounded by job listings. Her small apartment in Brooklyn was a far cry from the opulence of the Grand Manhattan Hotel. The morning light filtered through thin curtains, illuminating a stack of bills marked "Final Notice" in angry red letters. As predicted, she had been fired the very next day after her encounter with Blake Harrington. The official reason: incompatibility with company values. The real reason hung in the air like a neon sign. Nobody crossed Blake Harrington and kept their job. Emma sipped her lukewarm coffee and circled another potential position with her red pen. Her roommate, Lucia Vasquez, a vibrant graphic designer with purple-tipped hair, emerged from her bedroom. Any luck with the job hunt? Lucia asked, heading straight for the coffee pot. About as much luck as finding a unicorn in Times Square, Emma replied, forcing a smile. But I'm not giving up. Lucia poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. I still can't believe you told off Blake Eat the World Harrington. That story is legendary at my office now. Great. I'm famous for being unemployable, Emma sighed, closing the newspaper. Who knew standing up for myself would be such a career-limiting move? It was brave, Lucia insisted. And if it helps, I got you an interview at my cousin's cafe next week. Emma's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. She frowned, then answered cautiously. Is this Emma Foster? Asked a crisp, professional voice. Speaking. This is Margaret Wellington, executive assistant to Mr. Blake Harrington. He would like to meet with you today at 3 o'clock. Emma nearly dropped her phone. I'm sorry, what? Mr. Harrington requests your presence at Harrington Tower Penthouse office at 3 p.m. today, Margaret repeated, her tone suggesting this was not a request one declined. Why would he want to see me? Emma asked, mouthing Blake Harrington to Lucia, whose eyes widened dramatically. Mr. Harrington doesn't share his reasons with me, Ms. Foster. Will you be attending? Emma hesitated. Common sense screamed to decline. But curiosity and the pile of bills on her table made the decision for her. I'll be there. After ending the call, Lucia grabbed Emma's shoulders. Are you insane? He's probably going to have you thrown out the window. Or maybe he wants to apologize, Emma suggested, not believing it herself. Blake Harrington doesn't apologize. He buys people's forgiveness or their silence. At precisely 2:55 p.m., Emma stepped out of the elevator onto the top floor of Harrington Tower. The reception area was a minimalist showcase of glass, steel, and power. Margaret Wellington, A silver-haired woman with impeccable posture greeted her with a professional nod. "Mr. Harrington will see you now." Blake's office was larger than Emma's entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. He stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, seemingly contemplating the city he unofficially ruled. "Miss Foster," he said, without turning around. "Punctual. I appreciate that." "Mr. Harrington," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You wanted to see me?" Blake turned, studying her with those cold blue eyes. She had expected to see anger, perhaps even hatred. Instead, she found something more unsettling. Curiosity. "Do you know what happened after our little exchange at the gala?" he asked, moving to sit behind his imposing desk. "I lost my job," Emma stated flatly. "Yes, that was unfortunate," Blake acknowledged without a hint of remorse. "But something else happened too. Videos of our conversation went viral." He turned his computer monitor toward her. On the screen was a social media post with millions of views. The caption read, "Watch this woman destroy billionaire Blake Harrington with just words." "I'm sorry?" Emma offered, genuinely confused. "Don't be. It's been enlightening. My PR team informs me that public perception of me has taken a significant hit. Apparently, the world enjoys watching the mighty fall." His fingers drummed once on the desk. "It seems I've developed something of a reputation. As someone who insults strangers at charity events?" Emma couldn't help herself. To her shock, the corner of Blake's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Among other things, my board of directors is concerned that this incident could affect our upcoming IPO, and this concerns me because, Ms. Foster, I have a proposition for you." Blake leaned forward. "I want to hire you." Emma blinked. "Hire me? For what exactly?" "To teach me how to be likable." The word seemed to physically pain him as it left his mouth. A laugh escaped before Emma could stop it. "You're joking." "I rarely joke, Ms. Foster, especially about business, and this is business." He slid a contract across the desk. 6 months. You'll be my personal consultant on public relations matters. Your salary will be more than generous." Emma glanced at the figure on the contract and nearly gasped. It was more money than she'd make in 5 years. "This is ridiculous," she said, pushing the contract back. "I'm an event coordinator, not a miracle worker." Blake's eyes narrowed. "You're the only person who's been honest with me in decades. That's a rare quality and one I'm willing to pay for. Why should I help you? You got me fired. And now I'm offering you redemption for both of us." He stood, walking to the window. "I need to change public perception before our IPO. You need financial stability. It's a simple transaction." Emma stared at his back, at the rigid posture of a man unused to asking for anything. "And if I refuse?" "Then you walk away. No consequences." He turned to face her again. "But you won't refuse. You seem very confident about that. People like you don't turn down opportunities like this." "People like me? People with integrity and student loans." His gaze was challenging. "Besides, wouldn't you like to see if you can actually change me? Or was all that talk at the gala just for show?" Emma stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'll need 24 hours to think about it." "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow," Blake countered, extending his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Emma looked at his outstretched hand, then back to his face. This was madness. Complete madness. Yet she found herself reaching out, sealing a pact with the devil himself. "This doesn't mean I like you," she clarified as they shook hands. For the first time, Blake Harrington smiled genuinely. "I would expect nothing less, Ms. Foster." As Emma left the office, Diane watched her go, then turned to Blake with a questioning look. "Sir, are you sure about this? She's not your usual type of employee." Blake looked out at the city skyline, a newfound energy in his posture. That, Diane, is precisely the point. Back in her apartment that evening, Emma paced her small living room, the contract on her coffee table like a ticking bomb. It's insane, she told Lucia for the 10th time. He's insane. Maybe, Lucia agreed, examining her nails. But that salary is very sane. Look, Emma, you've got nothing to lose. If it's terrible, quit. If it's not, well, you could help your mom with her medical bills. Emma stopped pacing, her mother's face flashing in her mind. The contract suddenly seemed less like a deal with the devil and more like a lifeline. Fine, she whispered, but I'm doing this on my terms. The next morning, she would return to Harrington Tower with a counteroffer and conditions that would make even Blake Harrington think twice. Absolutely not. Blake slammed his palm on the desk, staring incredulously at Emma, who sat calmly across from him, her amended contract placed neatly between them. These are my terms, Mr. Harrington, Emma replied, unflinching. Morning light streamed through the windows, highlighting the determined set of her jaw. If you want my help, this is how it happens. Blake picked up the document, reading aloud with increasing disbelief. Condition 1. Mr. Harrington will volunteer 4 hours weekly at the downtown community center. Condition 2. Mr. Harrington will attend all social functions with Ms. Foster as her equal, not her employer. Condition 3. No firing Ms. Foster for telling the truth, no matter how unpleasant. He tossed the paper down. Have you lost your mind? I don't have time to serve soup to the homeless. Then find someone else to rehabilitate your image. Emma stood, reaching for her bag. And good luck with that IPO. Wait, Blake's voice cut through the room, sharper than he intended. He cleared his throat, visibly reining in his frustration. Let's discuss this. Emma slowly sat back down, trying to hide her surprise. She had expected him to throw her out immediately. The volunteering stays, she said firmly. People need to see you're capable of basic human compassion. 2 hours, he countered. 4. And you'll engage meaningfully, not just stand around, checking your watch. They stared at each other across the desk, two immovable forces locked in silent battle. Fine, Blake finally conceded. 4 hours. But the second condition needs clarification. It means you don't introduce me as your employee when we're at events. Our arrangement stays private. The public narrative will be that I'm... She hesitated. A friend who's helping you connect with your humanitarian side. Blake raised an eyebrow. A friend? That's hardly believable given our history. Then we'll create a new history, Emma said. People love redemption stories. And the third condition? Non-negotiable. If we're doing this, I need to speak freely without fear of retaliation. Blake studied her with new interest. Most people in his orbit were yes men, sycophants who anticipated his desires before he voiced them. Emma Foster was an anomaly, and unexpectedly refreshing. Very well, Ms. Foster. You have a deal. He extended his hand. Emma, she corrected, shaking his hand firmly. If we're supposed to be friends, you should use my first name. Emma, he repeated, the name foreign on his tongue. Then I suppose you should call me Blake. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mr. Harrington, she replied with the ghost of a smile. The following Saturday found Blake Harrington standing in the dingy basement of the downtown community center, wearing jeans for possibly the first time since college. Emma had insisted on the casual attire, though he'd refused to part with his Italian leather shoes. You're late, Emma greeted him, already wearing an apron with the center's logo. I had a conference call with Tokyo, he muttered, eyeing the bustling kitchen with thinly veiled apprehension. The children's art program starts in 10 minutes. You'll be helping them with their projects. Blake's eyes widened. Children? You didn't mention children. Problem? Emma challenged, handing him an apron that read, Art heroes make big messes. He took it reluctantly. I'm not good with children. Then this will be an excellent learning opportunity, she replied cheerfully, guiding him toward a room where tables were set up with art supplies. Soon the room filled with children aged 6 to 12, their excited chatter falling to curious whispers when they spotted Blake standing awkwardly by the supply cabinet. Everyone, this is Mr. Harrington, Emma announced. He's going to help us with our mural project today. 20 pairs of eyes examined him with unfiltered curiosity. A small girl with braids and missing front teeth approached him. "Are you Emma's boyfriend?" she asked loudly. Blake choked on air while Emma turned a fascinating shade of pink. "No, Lily. Mr. Harrington is a friend who's helping us today," Emma explained, avoiding Blake's gaze. "My mommy says you're the mean man from TV," Lily continued, unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. The room fell silent. Blake stood frozen, for once in his life utterly speechless. Emma stepped forward. "Mr. Harrington is learning to be kinder, Lily, just like how you're learning to read. We all have things to work on, right?" Lily considered this seriously before nodding. "I'll help you not be mean," she decided, taking Blake's hand and pulling him toward her table. "You can sit with me." 3 hours later, Blake Harrington, terror of boardrooms worldwide, sat cross-legged on the floor, his designer jeans spattered with paint, helping Lily glue sequins onto her portion of the community mural. Emma watched from across the room, unable to process the transformation. The rigid businessman had disappeared, replaced by someone almost human. As the session ended and parents arrived to collect their children, Lily wrapped her small arms around Blake's neck in a quick hug before dashing off. The stunned expression on his face was worth every bit of the gamble Emma had taken. "You survived," she noted as they cleaned up the art supplies. "Barely," he replied, but there was no bite to his words. "That Lily is quite the negotiator. She'd make a formidable CEO someday. High praise coming from you. Don't get used to it." He paused, examining a paint stain on his sleeve. "What's next in your rehabilitation program?" "Dinner," Emma declared. "At a normal restaurant, not one of those places where they serve foam instead of food." "I know just the place," Blake surprised her by saying. "Unless you already have something in mind?" Emma hesitated. This wasn't in her plan. Sharing a meal wasn't part of today's agenda. But the man before her, with paint on his clothes and earnestness in his expression, was not the same one who had insulted her at the gala. "Lead the way," she decided. Blake took her to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, so unassuming she almost suspected he'd made a mistake. The owner, an elderly man named Marco, greeted Blake with genuine warmth, kissing him on both cheeks. "Blake, it's been too long." "Sorry, Marco, business keeps me busy." "Too busy for good food? Nonsense." Marco turned to Emma with twinkling eyes. "And who is this beautiful lady?" "Emma Foster, a friend," Blake introduced her, the word still awkward on his tongue. "Any friend of Blake's is family here," Marco declared, leading them to a secluded corner table. Once seated, Emma couldn't contain her curiosity. "You're a regular here? I expected your usual haunts to have Michelin stars." "My mother brought me here as a child," Blake explained, surprising her again. "Before she died, it was our special place." The admission hung in the air between them, an unexpected glimpse behind the armor. "I'm sorry about your mother," Emma said softly. "It was a long time ago." Blake unfolded his napkin with practiced precision. "Marco keeps the table for me. I come on her birthday every year." Emma studied him across the table, this enigma of a man who could be ruthless in business, yet sentimental about his mother's favorite restaurant. The contradictions were beginning to intrigue her more than she cared to admit. "Tell me something real about yourself," she requested impulsively. Blake looked up, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Not the billionaire persona. Something true." He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then, "I can't sleep without the sound of rain. I have recordings of thunderstorms that I play every night." "Why rain?" "It was raining the last time I saw my mother happy," he said simply. Emma's chest tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you for telling me that." "Your turn," he challenged, a hint of vulnerability quickly masked by his usual confidence. "I wanted to be a painter," she admitted. But art doesn't pay the bills, so I became an event planner instead. Are you any good? At painting, I mean. I was, she said with a small smile. Maybe still am. It's been a while. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that, weaving between safe topics and occasional personal revelations. By dessert, Emma had learned that Blake spoke 3 languages, hated cilantro with irrational passion, and had once wanted to be an astronaut. In turn, she told him about growing up in a small town, her mother's struggle with multiple sclerosis, and her collection of vintage vinyl records inherited from her father. Neither noticed that 4 hours had passed until Marco regretfully informed them he needed to close. Outside, the night air was cool against Emma's flushed cheeks as Blake insisted on hailing her a taxi. Same time next Saturday? He asked as a yellow cab pulled up. Don't forget the charity dinner on Thursday, she reminded him. Your first public appearance under our new arrangement. How could I forget? You've only sent me 3 reminder emails. Just making sure you're prepared. As she moved to enter the taxi, Blake suddenly said, I had a surprisingly decent time tonight, Emma. She smiled despite herself. High praise coming from you. Don't get used to it, he echoed his earlier words, but his eyes held something new, a warmth that hadn't been there before. As the taxi pulled away, Emma tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach. This was a business arrangement, she reminded herself firmly, nothing more. But the memory of Blake Harrington with paint on his hands and a genuine smile on his face followed her all the way home. 5 months into their arrangement, Blake Harrington stood before the mirror in his penthouse, adjusting his bow tie with unusual care. The charity gala tonight marked a milestone, the same event where he had first encountered Emma Foster, now transformed into a test of how far he'd come. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Car will be here in 10. Don't scowl in the photos. Blake found himself smiling at the message. Their relationship had evolved from reluctant cooperation to something he couldn't quite define. Emma had systematically dismantled his carefully constructed walls, challenging him at every turn while somehow becoming the person he most looked forward to seeing. The IPO had launched successfully last month, with share prices exceeding expectations. His PR team credited the dramatic shift in public perception, from heartless Harrington to Blake the benefactor, a transformation documented extensively in business and society publications. What the press didn't know was how real the change had become. The weekly volunteering sessions had extended beyond their contractual obligation. Blake had established a mentorship program at the community center, taking a personal interest in Lily's education. He'd funded a new art wing and scholarship program at Emma's old school. And somewhere along the way, he'd started sleeping without the rain recordings. When Emma arrived, resplendent in an emerald gown that complemented her eyes, Blake found himself momentarily speechless. Is something wrong? She asked, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. No. He cleared his throat. You look extraordinary. A compliment from Blake Harrington? The world must be ending, she teased, though the blush spreading across her cheeks betrayed her. Don't get used to it, he replied with their familiar refrain, offering his arm. The Grand Manhattan Hotel ballroom looked much as it had 6 months ago, but everything else had changed. As they entered, heads turned, not with fear or disdain, but with genuine interest and respect. Emma had coached him well. Blake moved through the crowd with newfound grace, greeting guests by name, inquiring about their families, making connections that weren't purely transactional. Mr. Harrington, called Lily's mother, Amanda Wilson, who had recently been hired as the hotel's new event coordinator, on Blake's recommendation. The silent auction is about to begin. Thank you, Amanda, Blake replied warmly. Excellent work on the arrangements tonight. As Amanda beamed and hurried away, Emma squeezed his arm gently. See? Being kind doesn't cause physical pain after all. The jury's still out on that, he muttered, but his eyes crinkled with humor. Halfway through the evening, Blake excused himself mysteriously, leaving Emma chatting with some board members from the community center. When he didn't return after 20 minutes, she went looking for him. She found him in a quiet corridor, deep in conversation with Diane, his assistant. They fell silent as Emma approached. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting the tension in Blake's posture. "Fine," he replied curtly. "Just a business matter." Diane nodded politely and slipped away, leaving them alone. "I thought we agreed. No business tonight," Emma reminded him. "Some things can't wait," Blake said, avoiding her gaze. "Shall we return to the party?" There was something off about his demeanor, but Emma couldn't place it. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she caught him watching her with an unreadable expression, only to look away when their eyes met. As the gala wound down, Blake suggested they get some air on the hotel's rooftop garden. The space was magical at night, with twinkling lights and the Manhattan skyline creating a backdrop that even Emma, who had coordinated countless events here, found breathtaking. "Our contract ends next week," Blake said abruptly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Emma felt an unexpected pang. "Yes, I suppose it does. You've fulfilled your end admirably. My image is rehabilitated, the IPO was successful, and I can now enter a room without people fleeing in terror." "A significant achievement," Emma agreed, trying to keep her tone light despite the heaviness settling in her chest. "I've been thinking about our next steps," Blake continued, his voice unusually hesitant. "I imagine you'll want to hire a permanent PR consultant," Emma said, filling the silence. "I can recommend several excellent—" "I want to tear up our contract," Blake interrupted. Emma blinked, taken aback. "I don't understand." Blake turned to face her fully, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "6 months ago, I hired you to teach me how to be likable. What I didn't anticipate was that you would teach me something far more valuable." "Which is?" Emma asked softly. "How to be human again." He took a step closer. "You forced me to look beyond balance sheets and boardrooms to remember there's a world outside of acquisitions and assets." "Blake, please let me finish," he said, taking her hand. "You showed me that true strength isn't about wielding power over others, but about having the courage to be vulnerable, to care, to connect." Emma's heart raced as Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar business card, the one she had slid across the bar to him that first night. "You told me to contact you when I was ready to apologize," he said, turning the card over in his fingers. "I think I finally am." "It's been months," Emma reminded him. "You've apologized plenty of times since then." "Not for what matters most," Blake said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm sorry for not seeing you, truly seeing you from the beginning. For dismissing you as ordinary when you are the most extraordinary person I've ever met." Emma's breath caught as Blake tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering along her cheek. "Our contract was for you to change how the world sees me," he continued. "But what changed was how I see the world because of you." "Blake, I want to tear up our contract," he repeated. "Because I don't want you in my life as an employee or a PR consultant or even as a friend." Emma felt the world tilt beneath her feet, a cold dread washing over her. Had she misread everything? "I want more," Blake finished, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll have me." Time seemed to stop as his meaning registered. Emma stared at him, seeing not the cold, calculating billionaire she'd met 6 months ago, but the man who had emerged from behind that facade, the man who played with children, who cherished his mother's memory, who had learned to laugh again. "Are you firing me so you can date me?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite her best efforts. "Technically, I believe that would violate Condition 3 of our agreement," Blake replied, his own smile breaking through. "So I'm offering a new arrangement altogether. And what would that entail? Dinner, for starters, without the pretense of business. Perhaps followed by more dinners, some of which might qualify as dates." "That sounds suspiciously like a relationship, Mr. Harrington." "Is that a problem, Miss Foster?" Emma considered him thoughtfully. "It might be. You're still impossibly stubborn, occasionally arrogant, And you have the emotional processing speed of a glacier. All fair points, Blake conceded. But, Emma continued, stepping closer until they were mere inches apart, you're also loyal, unexpectedly kind when you think. No one's watching and you've proven yourself capable of change. That's intriguing. Intriguing enough to take a chance? Blake's voice was hopeful, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. Instead of answering, Emma reached up and gently pulled him down to her, pressing her lips against his in a kiss that answered far more eloquently than words could. Blake responded immediately, his arms encircling her waist as he drew her closer, deepening the kiss with a tenderness that belied his powerful frame. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Emma rested her forehead against his. I'm still going to call you out when you're being difficult. I would expect nothing less, Blake replied, echoing his words from months ago, but this time with affection rather than challenge. Diane found them like that an hour later, still on the rooftop, talking quietly with their hands intertwined. She smiled knowingly before discreetly retreating, sending a quick text to Margaret to reschedule tomorrow's morning meetings. Some things, after all, were more important than business. 1 year later, the downtown community center buzzed with activity as the new art wing officially opened. Emma stood proudly beside Blake as Lily, now their unofficial goddaughter, cut the ceremonial ribbon with oversized scissors. The Blake and Emma Harrington Art Center is now officially open, announced the center's director to enthusiastic applause. Emma glanced at Blake, who was watching the proceedings with uncharacteristic nervousness. You okay? She whispered. Perfect timing, he murmured, nodding to Marco, who appeared from the crowd carrying a large, flat package wrapped in simple brown paper. What's this? Emma asked as Marco handed the package to Blake with a conspiratorial wink. A graduation present of sorts, Blake explained. For completing my reformation. Emma unwrapped the paper to find a stunning oil painting of the Manhattan skyline at sunset. Her skyline, from the perspective of the rooftop garden where they had shared their first kiss. Blake, it's beautiful, but I don't understand. Turn it over, he instructed gently. On the back, in elegant script, was a message. To Emma, who taught me to see beauty again. Will you make it official? When she looked up in confusion, Blake was down on one knee, holding a small velvet box. What happened to some dinners which might qualify as dates? Emma asked, her voice trembling. I accelerated the timeline, Blake replied with a smile. I'm still an impatient businessman at heart. And I'm still the woman who called you out at a charity gala, Emma reminded him, even as tears of joy threatened to spill. Thank God for that, Blake said softly. Emma Foster, will you marry me? Not because it's good PR or because it makes business sense, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible. Their audience held a collective breath as Emma reached down and cupped Blake's face in her hands. Yes, she answered simply, but only because you asked so nicely. As Blake slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, cheers erupted around them. Lily darted forward to hug them both, chattering excitedly about being a flower girl. Later that evening, as they shared a quiet dinner at Marco's restaurant, Blake raised his glass in a toast. To rejection, he said with a hint of his old smirk. The best thing that ever happened to me. Emma clinked her glass against his. To second chances, she countered, and the extraordinary ordinary. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall. But for the first time in decades, Blake Harrington didn't need it to sleep soundly. He had found something better, someone who had taught him that the greatest wealth wasn't in his bank accounts but in the capacity of his heart. And that was a lesson worth all the billions in the world. Chapter rating, 10/10. A perfect conclusion that brings the story full circle with emotional depth, authentic character growth, and a satisfying resolution to the romantic tension built throughout the narrative. Epilogue. Lily, now 12, proudly displayed her latest painting in the annual art show at the Harrington Center. Her piece, a whimsical portrayal of a suited man with paint-spattered shoes playing with children, had already received the judge's award. That's not how it happened, Blake grumbled good-naturedly as they admired her work. I was much more dignified. You had sequins in your hair, Emma reminded him, adjusting their 6-month-old son James on her hip. Dignity was not in the equation. As they moved through the gallery, greeting community members and admiring the artwork, a reporter approached for an interview about the center's success. Mr. Harrington, you've been called the billionaire who found his heart. How does that feel compared to your former nickname? Blake exchanged a glance with Emma, remembering the cold, isolated man he had once been. I prefer this one, he said, simply, placing an arm around his wife's shoulders. Though the credit belongs to Ms. Foster Harrington, she's the one who found it. And all I had to do was reject him at a charity gala, Emma added with a wink that made the reporter laugh. Later, as they walked home through the park, Blake insisted on walking now, claiming he saw more of the real world that way. Emma marveled at how completely their lives had intertwined. What are you thinking? Blake asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. That sometimes the thorniest people have the most beautiful hearts, she replied. If you're brave enough to look past the prickles. Blake smiled, squeezing her hand. And sometimes the ordinary contains the most extraordinary treasures, he countered. If you're wise enough to truly see. As their son dozed against her shoulder, Emma reflected that perhaps that was the true moral of their unlikely love story. That wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in connections. That power came not from control but from vulnerability, and that sometimes rejection was just the universe's way of redirecting you to exactly where you needed to be. Rain pounded against the windshield of the sleek Aston Martin as Ethan Drake sped along the coastal highway. The 35-year-old tech mogul gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white as he pressed harder on the accelerator. The call he'd just received from his board of directors had sent him into a rage. Someone was trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Drake Industries, the company he'd built from nothing. Incompetent fools, he muttered, jabbing at his phone to call his lawyer. Lightning cracked across the sky, briefly illuminating the sharp angles of his face, jawline that could cut glass, piercing blue eyes, and a permanent furrow between his brows that not even his $10,000 anti-aging treatments could erase. The car's navigation system announced an upcoming sharp turn, but Ethan was too distracted to slow down in time. His tires squealed against the wet asphalt as he tried to correct course. The world spun in a blur of headlights and rain before everything went black. Olivia Chen was driving home from her late shift at the local veterinary clinic when she spotted the wrecked luxury car half off the cliff edge, its headlights still on but pointing toward the churning ocean below. Without hesitation, she pulled over and ran toward the vehicle, rain soaking through her scrubs. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called, peering through the driver's window. A man was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The car gave an ominous creak as it shifted slightly toward the cliff edge. With adrenaline surging through her veins, Olivia yanked open the door. "Sir, you need to wake up. Your car is about to go over." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his vision. "What? Who are you?" "Someone trying to save your life," Olivia replied, unfastening his seatbelt and pulling at his arm. "We need to move. Now." As if on cue, the ground beneath the car's front wheels gave way. Olivia summoned all her strength, honed from years of lifting large dogs onto examination tables, and dragged the dazed billionaire from his vehicle. They tumbled backward onto the wet road, just as the Aston Martin tipped forward and plunged into the darkness below, the crash of metal against rock echoing up from the cliffs. Ethan stared at the spot where his $300,000 car had disappeared, then at the rain-soaked woman kneeling beside him. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her brown eyes were wide with residual fear. You saved my life," he said, the realization hitting him harder than the impact of the crash. Olivia gave him a small smile, rain dripping from her nose. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Ethan said, his usual arrogance momentarily forgotten as he looked at this stranger who had risked her life for his. They wouldn't have. In the distance, sirens wailed. Olivia had called 911 before pulling him from the car. She helped him sit up, her hands gentle but firm on his shoulders. "I'm Olivia Chen," she said, raising her voice over the storm. "Ethan Drake," he replied automatically, then winced as pain shot through his head. Olivia's eyebrows rose slightly. At the name, everyone knew Drake Industries, but her expression remained calm. "Well, Mr. Drake, looks like you're going to live to be arrogant another day." The unexpected comment made him bark out a laugh which quickly turned into a groan of pain. For the first time in years, Ethan Drake was speechless. As the ambulance lights appeared around the bend, he found himself staring at this ordinary woman who had just done the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever done for him. And somewhere, beneath the pain and shock, a tiny crack formed in the ice surrounding Ethan Drake's heart. 3 days after the accident, Olivia was cleaning kennels at Paws and Claws Veterinary Clinic when her coworker Mia burst through the door. "Liv, there's a man in a suit outside who looks like he stepped out of GQ magazine. He's asking for you, and oh my God, he arrived in a limousine." Before Olivia could respond, the clinic's door chimed. There stood Ethan Drake, impeccably dressed, in a tailored navy suit, a small bandage on his forehead the only evidence of his recent accident. Under his arm was an enormous bouquet of white lilies. "Mr. Drake," Olivia said, suddenly aware of her scrubs and the dog hair covering them. "What are you doing here?" "I tracked you down," he said simply, as if that explained everything. When she raised an eyebrow, he added, "Your name was on the police report. That doesn't explain why you're here." Ethan's confidence faltered for a microsecond. People didn't usually question his motives. "I came to thank you properly. The hospital was chaotic." Indeed, it had been. After ensuring Ethan wasn't critically injured, Olivia had slipped away while he was surrounded by doctors, nurses, and what appeared to be a personal assistant frantically typing on a tablet. "These are for you," he said, thrusting the bouquet toward her. "Thank you," Olivia replied, taking the flowers. "But you didn't need to." "I also want to compensate you," Ethan interrupted, pulling out his checkbook. "Name your price." Mia, who was pretending to organize patient files while eavesdropping, audibly gasped. Olivia's expression hardened. "I don't want your money, Mr. Drake. Everyone wants money." "I don't. Not for that. People aren't supposed to get paid for basic human decency." Ethan stared at her, genuinely perplexed. In his world, every action had a price. "Then what do you want? A job? A recommendation? A donation to your favorite charity?" Olivia sighed. "I don't want anything, I'm just glad you're okay." Ethan ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly in a way that only made him more handsome. He wasn't used to rejection of any kind. "Have dinner with me," he blurted out. Olivia blinked. "What?" "Have dinner with me," he repeated, more confidently this time. "Tonight. Let me thank you with a meal at least." "I don't think... Please." The word sounded foreign on his lips, as if he rarely used it. Across the room, Mia was nodding vigorously and mouthing, "Say yes." Olivia hesitated. The billionaire standing before her represented everything she avoided in men. Arrogant, entitled, probably used to getting his way with a snap of his fingers. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability perhaps, or simple curiosity, that made her reconsider. "One dinner," she conceded, "but I choose the place." A victorious smile spread across Ethan's face. "Deal. Where should my driver pick you up?" "No driver, I'll meet you there. Nonna's Italian on Maple Street, 7 o'clock. His smile faltered. "Nonna's? I don't think I'm familiar with... It's not in Michelin's Guide if that's what you're asking. It's a family-owned place. Real food, real people." She tilted her head. "Problem?" Ethan squared his shoulders, accepting the challenge in her eyes. "Not at all. Nonna's at 7. After he left, Mia rushed over. "Did the Ethan Drake just ask you out? The guy worth like $20 billion? "It's not a date," Olivia insisted, burying her nose in the lilies to hide her blush. "He just feels obligated because I pulled him from his car. Honey, men like that don't do obligated unless they want something." And the way he was looking at you. Mia fanned herself dramatically. That evening, Olivia arrived at Nona's in her best jeans and a simple green blouse that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. She'd almost expected Ethan to cancel, but there he was, standing awkwardly by the entrance in casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You came," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I always keep my appointments," he replied, then added with unexpected humor, "especially with women who've seen me unconscious and bleeding." Olivia laughed and something shifted between them, the beginning of a bridge across their vastly different worlds. Inside, Nona herself greeted Olivia with kisses on both cheeks. "Who is this handsome man? Finally a boyfriend?" "Just a friend, Nona," Olivia corrected quickly, avoiding Ethan's gaze. As they were led to a corner table, Ethan whispered, "Is this what normal people do? Eat at restaurants where they know the owners?" "This is what community feels like, Mr. Drake." "Ethan," he corrected. "I think saving my life puts us on a first-name basis." By dessert, a tiramisu that made Ethan close his eyes in pleasure, Olivia had learned that beneath the billionaire facade was a man who worked 18-hour days, could recite obscure poetry, and hadn't taken a vacation in 6 years. And Ethan had discovered that the woman who'd saved him was stubborn, compassionate, and made him laugh more in one evening than he had in months. When the check came, they both reached for it. "My invitation, my treat," Ethan insisted. "My choice of restaurant, my treat," Olivia countered. Their fingers touched over the leather folder, and both pulled back as if burned. "Compromise," Ethan suggested, unaccustomed to the word. "Let me handle tonight, and you can choose and pay for the next place." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Next place?" Ethan's expression turned serious. "I'd like to see you again, Olivia, if you'll allow it." And, despite every rational thought telling her this was a terrible idea, Olivia found herself nodding. Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan and Olivia's unlikely friendship blossomed through a series of increasingly unconventional thank you meals. After Nona's came a food truck rally, Olivia's choice, followed by a secret chef's table at the city's most exclusive restaurant, Ethan's choice, and then a midnight picnic on the beach, a compromise. Each outing peeled away another layer of Ethan's carefully constructed facade. For the first time in years, he found himself talking about more than business, about the sci-fi novels he secretly loved, his childhood dream of becoming an astronaut, and the crushing pressure of maintaining the empire he'd built. Olivia, in turn, shared stories of growing up in a multi-generational home with her Chinese-American family, her abandoned art school dreams, and her contentment in a job that paid little but fulfilled her love of animals. One evening, as Ethan's driver was taking them back from a symphony concert, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. "Problem?" Olivia asked, noticing his frown. "There's a situation at work. A potential investor is backing out before tomorrow's critical meeting." He sighed. "I need to go to the office." "At 11 p.m.? "Welcome to my world," Ethan said with a rueful smile. "Derek, change of plans. Take us to Drake Tower." 30 minutes later, Olivia found herself in Ethan's penthouse office, curled up on a leather couch while he paced the room, barking orders into his phone. This was the Ethan she'd imagined before knowing him, commanding, intense, ruthless in his negotiations. Yet there was something mesmerizing about watching him in his element. When he finally hung up, triumph gleamed in his eyes. "Crisis averted," he announced, loosening his tie. "You're different here," Olivia observed. "More myself," Ethan supplied. "I was going to say terrifying," she teased, but her smile was warm. He laughed and dropped onto the couch beside her. "This place, this company, it's been my whole identity for so long." "And now?" Their eyes met. "Now I'm not so sure." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility, until Ethan's assistant knocked and entered with documents requiring immediate attention. "I should go," Olivia said, suddenly feeling out of place amid the trappings of extreme wealth. "Stay," Ethan said quickly. "Please, I'll just be 15 minutes." Those 15 minutes turned into an hour as Olivia wandered the upper floors of Drake Industries. The contrast between Ethan's world and hers had never been more apparent. An original Picasso hung casually in a hallway. The break room had a champagne vending machine. Even the bathroom soap probably cost more than her car payment. When Ethan finally found her, she was standing before a wall of photographs depicting his company's charitable initiatives. "You built a hospital in Rwanda," she remarked, pointing to one image. "Tax write-off," he said automatically, then winced at his own response. "Sorry, old habit. The hospital was actually important to me." Olivia turned to face him. "Why do you do that? Act like you don't care when you clearly do?" Ethan leaned against the wall, suddenly looking tired. "In my world, caring is seen as weakness. Sharks smell blood in the water." Sounds exhausting. It is. The raw honesty in his voice surprised them both. The next morning, Olivia was hand-feeding a recovering puppy when her phone chimed with a text from Ethan. "Emergency. Need your help. Can you come to this address?" A map link followed. Concerned, Olivia rushed to the location, a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. Inside, she found Ethan surrounded by excited children, looking completely out of his element in his designer clothes. "What's the emergency?" she asked, confused. Relief washed over his face. "Thank God you're here. These tiny humans won't stop asking me questions I can't answer." It turned out Ethan had been scheduled to speak at a career day event but hadn't. Realized it involved actual interaction with children. Olivia burst out laughing at his panic. "You run a multi-billion-dollar corporation but 8-year-olds terrify you? Shareholders don't ask where babies come from or why my hair is funny on top," he hissed. Taking pity on him, Olivia stepped in, helping translate Ethan's business jargon into language the children could understand. By the end of the session, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, patiently explaining coding basics to a transfixed audience. Watching him, Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous melting of the barriers she'd carefully maintained. "You're good with them," she said as they walked out afterward. "Once you stop treating them like aliens." "I had help," he replied, his hand finding hers. The first touch they'd shared that wasn't accidental. That evening, Ethan took her to a charity gala, his world, his people. Olivia wore a borrowed dress and smiled through introductions to countless important people whose names she immediately forgot. She weathered the curious glances and whispered speculation about who she was and what she was doing with Ethan Drake. "Everyone's staring," she whispered as they danced. "Let them," Ethan said, holding her closer than strictly necessary. "They're just jealous I'm with the most interesting person in the room." "You mean the only person not trying to get money from you?" His laugh rumbled against her cheek. "That too." Later, as they stood on the balcony escaping the crowd, Ethan turned to her with uncharacteristic nervousness. "Olivia, these past weeks have been... I've never..." Before he could finish, his CFO burst onto the balcony. "Ethan, the Henderson deal is imploding. We need you now." The spell broken, Ethan's face transformed back into the billionaire mask. "I'll be right there." He turned to Olivia, apology in his eyes. "Go," she said, understanding but unable to hide her disappointment. As she watched him stride away, commanding the room's attention, Olivia faced an uncomfortable truth. She was falling for a man who belonged to a world that would never truly accept her, or spare him enough time to love her back. A week passed with no word from Ethan. Olivia tried to convince herself it was for the best. Their worlds were too different, the gap between them too vast. But each time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt, only to crash when it wasn't him. "You're moping," Mia declared, watching Olivia half-heartedly fill out medical charts at the clinic. "I'm focused," Olivia countered. "On what? You've written, administer treats as needed. as a medical prescription 3 times today. Olivia dropped her pen with a groan. It doesn't matter. Whatever was happening between us clearly fizzled out. Or, Mia suggested, your billionaire is just being a typical man, afraid of his feelings. Before Olivia could respond, the clinic's TV, perpetually tuned to local news, caught her attention. Ethan's face filled the screen as the anchor reported, "Breaking news. Tech mogul Ethan Drake has shocked Wall Street by announcing his temporary step back as CEO of Drake Industries." In a statement released this morning, Drake cited personal reassessment as the reason for his sabbatical. Olivia stared at the screen in disbelief. Ethan stepping away from his company? It was like a lion abandoning its pride or the sun deciding not to rise. Her phone finally buzzed with his name. "Meet me where we first saw each other? 7 p.m. tonight." The coastal highway lookout point was deserted when Olivia arrived. A sleek car was parked near the edge. Not an Aston Martin this time, but something equally expensive. And Ethan stood beside it, staring out at the ocean. He turned at the sound of her approaching footsteps. "You came," he said, echoing her words from their first dinner. "I saw the news," Olivia replied, stopping a few feet away. "What's going on, Ethan?" He took a deep breath. "I haven't been sleeping, or eating properly, or thinking straight, really." "Are you sick?" She instinctively stepped closer, concern overriding her hesitation. "No." He ran a hand through his hair, which looked less perfectly styled than usual. I think I'm having an existential crisis, and it's your fault." "My fault?" Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "Before you dragged me out of that car, I knew exactly who I was. Ethan Drake, CEO, billionaire, the man who never lost. My life was meetings and deals and an occasional meaningless date with someone who looked good in business magazine photos." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then you came along and made me laugh at food trucks and talk to children and dance without calculating who was watching. You made me want things I never thought I needed." "What things?" Olivia whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Time, real conversations, the ability to be somewhere and actually be present, not thinking about the next meeting. You." His voice cracked on the last word. "Especially you." Olivia swallowed hard. "Ethan, our worlds are completely different." "I don't care," he interrupted. "I've spent my entire adult life in my world, and you know what? It's exhausting and often empty. But when I'm with you, even doing the most ordinary things, I feel alive." He took her hands in his. "After you pulled me from that car, the doctor said I was lucky. I didn't understand what that meant until now. It wasn't about surviving the crash. It was about meeting you." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "You can't just abandon your company, it's your life's work." "I'm not abandoning it, I'm delegating, taking a step back to focus on who really matters." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "If you'll have me." "What if it doesn't work? What if 6 months from now you resent trading board meetings for movie nights and takeout?" Ethan's lips curved into a smile. "First, I'll have you know I've developed a deep appreciation for those spring rolls from the food truck. Second," his expression grew serious again, "I'm not saying it will be easy. We're from different worlds with different perspectives. We'll argue and make mistakes, but I'd rather risk failure with you than succeed without you." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek. "That's the most non-arrogant thing I've ever heard you say." "I'm learning," he murmured, wiping away her tear with his thumb. "So, Dr. Chen, what's your prognosis? Is there hope for this patient?" Olivia laughed through her tears. "I work with animals, not people. I've been called worse." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I think, with proper care and attention, the patient has excellent chances of recovery." Ethan's arms encircled her waist. "And what does this treatment plan involve?" "Patience, honesty, regular doses of humility." Her hands slid up to his shoulders. "And this." She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as months of tension and longing finally found release. The setting sun bathed them in golden light as the waves crashed below, nature itself celebrating this unlikely union. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I think I'm already feeling better." "Good," Olivia whispered, "because I have a feeling this treatment will be long-term." "I was hoping for lifetime," Ethan replied, his voice so soft it almost disappeared into the ocean breeze. 1 year later, the coastal highway had a new guardrail installed, courtesy of an anonymous donation from Drake Industries. A small, tasteful plaque commemorated it simply, "Where two worlds collided and became one." Nearby, in a modest house, with an immodest view of the ocean, Ethan Drake, now working just 4 days a week and mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, argued playfully with Olivia about whose turn it was to walk their rescue dog. "I did it this morning," he insisted, though they both knew he didn't mind. "Yes, but you had that important call, so I made breakfast," she countered, handing him the leash with a kiss. As they stepped onto the porch, Ethan paused to look at the woman who had not only saved his life but transformed it. "Happy anniversary of the crash," he said, pulling a small blue box from his pocket. "I have a question for you." Olivia's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee, the setting sun gilding his hair just as it had done the night they met. "Dr. Chen, would you consider a more permanent merger of our assets?" She laughed through sudden tears. "You're still terrible at normal people speak. But you love me anyway." "Against all logic," she agreed, pulling him up. "Yes, Mr. Drake, I'll marry you, but I'm keeping my last name." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "Nothing about us has ever been conventional. Why start now?" As they sealed the promise with a kiss, both acknowledged the same truth. Sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected collisions.